This is Local Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance in Sacramento today, and we are joined by Jennifer Whiting. She is with the League of California Cities. And I have to think the League is pleased that the governor called a special session, one of two, focused specifically on transportation. I've been speaking with many of your members, and they have been very, very concerned about the state of roads in California. Talk to us about the special session.
Absolutely. We were very pleased that the governor called the special session back in January in his initial budget proposal for this year. He talked about the need for addressing the needs of the transportation system.
Right.
It has continued to be a priority for the legislature, one bill was introduced by Senator Bell,
Right.
and we were very excited in February when Speaker Atkins had put out a framework for a proposal, although that was never introduced in bill form. It's really time for the state to focus on this issue and get something done by the end of session.
Let me ask you about the vehicle, if I can use that cliche or that pun, which is the special session. Some folks have argued, okay, it's a special session, that's nice, there's focus, but it should have been handled as part of the grander budget negotiation. What's your sense of that?
Well, it would have been nice to have it handled as part of the broader budget negotiation, but there are a lot of different components of the budget, and frankly, it's just some years not possible to get every agreement on everything to go forward.
That being said, you know better than I that the state has got $60 billion in overdue road repairs. That is a huge number, Jennifer. How do we get a handle on that?
We're working on how to get a handle on it, and I'm actually going to make that number even worse for you.
Please.
Because that $60 billion is just for the state highway system. It does not include the $78 billion 10-year needs of the local streets and road system or the $70 billion needs of the transit system. So when we really look at the large picture, it's a phenomenal number. It's very hard to get your head around. There are things that we can do. We're looking at different packages of fees and taxes that we can put forward.
And let's talk about that.
Sure.
I think it's fair to say that the probably most relevant would be looking at the gas tax. You know better than I that when we look at the gas tax, we can't deny that we have not seen an increase in the gas tax in about 2 decades.
That's correct.
And over the last 2 decades, one of the blessings has been, when you look at greenhouse gas emissions, we have less of them because we have more fuel-efficient vehicles and some vehicles that use zero gas. The curse is that means we have less cars using gas, paying gas tax.
Yes, absolutely. And I think the state in the long run is going to have to look at something other than the gas tax for transportation funding. The last time we raised the gas tax, as you talked about, was in 1994. We raised it to 18 cents. If we factor in inflation and fuel mileage, it's now worth 9 cents a gallon, a 50% drop in the value of that. The state is looking long-term into possibly doing a vehicle miles traveled. The state's calling it road usage charge.
And let me ask you about vehicle mile traveled, vehicles miles traveled. As you know, this is a popular program in Europe. On the one hand, it feels intuitive. The more you use the road, the more you should pay. But let's consider the state of California. Many folks use the road more, not out of desire, but out of necessity. They can't afford a home near their work. They need to move out. So they spend more time on the road because they're not as well off. And so should we be arguably punishing them because they're trying to find a bigger home with better schools?
I don't see it as punishing them. For one thing, those same people right now are already paying more in gas taxes.
They are.
So transitioning to a vehicle miles traveled fee doesn't mean they're going to pay a higher proportion of the taxes and fees coming into the state.
Is that what the statisticians would say? I'm clearly not one. Does it kind of average out?
Well, it depends on what the state sets the road usage charge at in the end. The idea right now, I think, is to keep it the same for as many people as possible. Obviously, if people are using an electric vehicle or a vehicle with better fuel mileage, they are going to pay a little bit more. They may pay a little bit more than what they are today because they're not paying
zero.
The gas
taxes.
Yes.
And that begs the question, what about a model whereby we charge a fee to those that buy no emission vehicles that use no gas or low emission vehicles. Arguably counterintuitive to the goals of AB 32, but they are using the roads and they're not paying.
Certainly. We are supporting a proposal this year that would implement a $100 annual fee on electric vehicles for purposes of paying
Right.
for the roads and freeways. So that is certainly something that's on the table. And to put that a little bit into perspective, they still will be paying, there will still be an incentive to buy those vehicles. The average car owner pays $368 a year for gas tax, and this would just be a $100
Interesting.
fee. So they're still getting a major incentive.
Well, why not then $368? Why not even it out completely?
I think we would be happy to have that conversation.
More on VMT. Another concern I've heard raised has been privacy concerns, because in order to calculate, one needs to know how far one has driven. I don't know. I mean, it is a concern, so I ask.
Yeah, that's definitely a concern. It is a concern of our members also. It's something that we're watching in the discussion. The California Transportation Commission's Road Usage Charge Committee actually has privacy experts on the committee that are taking a look at those issues and making sure that there will be options for people who don't want some kind of GPS tracker looking at where they're driving or how much they're driving.
Right.
Whether it be some kind of time permit or a permit that you buy for I'm going to drive 1,000 miles, so your
that's
permit is
interesting.
good for
Oh, okay.
1,000 miles.
What about tolls? Is that another option to consider? I mean, we kind of pride ourselves in California that we're not the tri-state area of New York where there's a toll every minute.
Right.
But we are looking at tolls in Orange County, other areas. There are private toll roads. What about looking at tolls as a way to raise revenue?
I think that discussion is also, or I know that discussion is also happening. I think that's a much more viable option for the state highway system.
I see.
It's very difficult to have tolls on local streets and roads.
Well stated. What else is in the pipeline? What other options are being considered, to the extent you're aware?
So a few years ago, the state took the weight fees from
yes.
trucks and transferred them, instead of having them go straight to pay-as-you-go transportation projects, they're now going to pay for transportation bond debt service. The state is looking at putting those back into pay-as-you-go transportation projects. That's $1 billion a year. Also, just a general vehicle license fee or vehicle registration fee increase. A few years ago, the state did decrease the vehicle license fee. There is a discussion about increasing that
But
again.
let's talk about that. A governor lost his job over the vehicle registration fee, Greg Davis. Query whether, is that palatable?
I think it is palatable under certain conditions. I think if it's a reasonable fee and it's protected and people know how it's being used, that the voters of California will accept that.
And then when we consider the mood around taxes generally, no doubt the voters in California had been generous. In 2012, they passed Prop 30 by a wider margin than many expected. It's not clear to me whether under the declaration to go into special session, they're looking to go back to the voters for taxes.
Yes.
Could be passed with 2/3, I presume, of the legislature. So where do we go on that front? How do we get more taxes and fees passed?
Well, I think there are two options, right? The legislature can go in and raise it by 2/3, or in the governor's last term, he always asked to go to the voters. He has left that door open.
I heard
for
him
this
say that,
term.
right? Yes.
So
yes.
he may not be asking us to go back to the voters, but we will talk. We will be having that discussion with the legislature.
And I think it's fair to say that Democrats are more likely supportive of voting in favor of revenue enhancements in the legislature. You need some Republicans as well.
Certainly.
Have you spoken with some of the Republicans and whether they're considering this?
We have been talking to the Republican caucuses, and I think transportation is the one place where the Democrats and the Republicans can come together. The Republicans see the needs of their roads and their highways. They hear it from their constituents
A lot
about
of
the potholes.
rural, right? A lot of rural
This is-
representation.
This is the one. I think this is the one place where they can come together. and cut
Her
a
name
deal.
is Jennifer Whiting. She is with the League of California Cities. My name is Brad Pomerance from Sacramento. It's Local Edition.